All right. So really the only two things that are on the agenda are the discussion of the findings of the Athletic Fields Task Force, and to make sure we're all on the same page, following discussion that Chad had with, with Chad's presentation last time in the public meeting and with the stakeholders. Are there any adjustments to what we had proposed that anybody thinks that need to be made?
I don't know about adjustments, but there was that one party that complained about turf fields.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, synthetic fields versus turf fields, and
Yep.
I mean, we weren't proposing a whole bunch of synthetic fields. I think we're just taking one, maybe two the most. But she seemed opposed to having any.
I thought we were proposing a lot of synthetic fields.
Yeah, I think they are quite a number there. She did email me. Her name was Eugenia. Can't remember her last name. V. And I sent an email back to her, and I explained that the exact specifications for the turf. We're not even. That's something a year or more down the road when that decision is made. When we're evaluating products, or when the town is evaluating products, if they in fact decide to put a synthetic field down. Her points are well taken about, that we want to make sure that we're looking at the safety of users, and we're looking at, any type of environmental impacts and giving that its due, consideration. And we also want to, on the other hand, you want to make sure that you have a field that's getting the use that, the town needs out of it, and other factors. So I think the letter she actually shared with us was something from it was nearly, I don't know, 7-8 years ago or something like that. And certainly turf products have changed a lot since then. So
yeah,
there's given by the time we're going to build this, I'm sure there's going to be
even
some
better
technology at that point as well. So
Gary, isn't it more about the fill than the actual?
Well, it is a bit. I think that's more the health concern of the users, like crumb rubber. What kind of health impacts there are from crumb rubber? I think one of the points she made was the actual blades of fake grass. That's not recyclable material. And what do you do when you replace your turf and you've got this whole carpet that covers all that area that can't be recycled? There's an environmental cost to that as well. So, but yeah, I don't know that I have any of those answers at this point.
So yeah, I mean, I would say that's one of those. It's definitely something that I don't know if we as a committee want to look into. I mean, we're recommending synthetic fields. If we want to look into it, we certainly can or should. Or if we don't want, if we think it's that great of a health risk and we want to do only natural fields, we'd need more fields to make it match up, right? Like a synthetic field is about 1 1/3 field. So for every synthetic field we lose, we need another third of a field somewhere else of natural grass.
That doesn't seem realistic.
Right. And I did look into some of those, issues a little bit. The Connecticut Department of Health, on their website, they've done research, and they have findings and guidance for municipalities on their website. And so far, all the data that they've found still supports using synthetic turf fields and crumb rubber. It does not say that you shouldn't use either of those yet. Ironically, they do have quite a bit of guidance about natural turf, right? And the fertilizers and everything that you can't use on school projects now anymore. So if you look at it from that perspective, the side that's been more heavily regulated in Connecticut is definitely the natural turf over the synthetic turf. I don't want to say there's never going to be a problem where but right now all the data looks to prove that it's safe. The letter that she sent, I did go through it and I looked up the group out of New Haven that they referenced or got their material from, that I forget the name of it. But I looked them up and I looked up some of their papers and documentation that they've used. And then I went to some of the turf companies too to see what they provide. So it's one of those, I don't think we need to have the answer, but it's probably worth having as a committee. If we're going to be recommending synthetic turf fields, we should all be comfortable that it's safe enough, at least for us to recommend at this level, and let the town kind of suss out the real details down the road as exactly what the turf product is, exactly what the infill is, and things like that. So
I think one of the things after we go to the, the town council, the initial charge of this group is to go to the council with recommendations on what we're doing for athletic fields and what kind of fields we need and where to put them. That was really our charge. And, if after going to the council and we kind of get this thing moving forward and the council wants to have this committee explore that in more detail, I mean, I don't know, I'm certainly willing, and I'm sure there are a lot of other people on these on the calls that would also be willing to continue to look into it and make recommendations from that standpoint.
I have a question with regards to the final presentation and how we present. Was there any more discussion about putting them in order of importance or some kind of, a rating system or scoring system? Because I saw that on this agenda for tonight, there is to discuss various means of funding implementation of the fields. And, the total dollar amount is large. And, if the town ends up going through a bad time with regards to expenses or, the budget, that they may have to do it some kind of piecemeal or CIPs. And if they're broken out into different projects, then they'll at least have our recommendation of what order we'd like them to go in. I think that it had been spoken up before that you don't want to taint them by giving an order which suggests that you'd accept something less than the whole package. But I mean, I think from an honest perspective, we owe it that we need to provide our opinion as a group of the importance of each field, so that if they do end up having to piecemeal it or only do a little bit of it, what's most important. Was that ever discussed anymore?
I don't think we ever discussed that, Bruce, in a meeting. Certainly we didn't assign rankings to things, but again, I think, and you're a former town councilor, so you probably know more about this than I do. But for me, that the charge of the committee was to kind of determine the level of need and make recommendations for how to meet that need. The decisions on how to fund it or whether to go to referendum or, excuse me, CIP is kind of a town council question.
Get some water.
Is it true that up to this point, I would say these athletic fields have gone through the CIP process, right? That's fair to say that's we've never had a quote referendum to do something like this. So to me, for the last 1960, seems like we've been doing the CIP process, and that's kind of put us in the situation that we're in. I mean, it's hard to set aside money to, put a new track in under a CIP when a bridge blows up, or a bridge fails. So now we have something that was unanticipated, and I think that's why seems to me like that's why where we are. If it's true that that's what we've been doing to this point, I guess. Bruce, you probably know better than I.
I think that there's been things that have come up with regards to CIPs and fields, like even the tennis, look at the tennis courts that finally went through. There's been several proposals of fields before. I mean, I was on the council, the whole down by Grasso Tech, the whatever the fields are called, where the Little League field is, where there was the talk of that, and part of it was in our plan now to look at possibly putting 2 or 3 fields in down there. That came in for us, and it was I want to say it was a $5 million plus endeavor that went nowhere. And I think that all of us can have a lot of opinions about these things, but for better or for worse, it does come down to money. And you're going to hear that there's never a good time. You guys have all heard it on different things. There's never a good time to do it. We just came off of bonding for the new schools, which was a substantial amount of money. And so it's going to be a tough sell I think for the town people, for the constituents, for another, whatever it is, $5, $8, $10 million to complete this plan. So if we give the plan to the council without any input of what we feel is most important, then the decision is going to fall on them. And ultimately it is going to fall on them. So if we don't, I think it's within our purview and responsibility to, say what we think is most important as a group, or at least have it ready should it come up in discussion. Maybe if you don't feel comfortable, submitting it first, at least having that document ready to give them should they ask for it. But they're not gonna, I don't think that any council, whether it was me sitting on it or the council that's there now, is gonna have the finger on the pulse of the needs of athletic fields more than the committee does. So that's why they're tasking the committee to do it. And certainly the committee knows or can devise a plan of what's the most important. That the dollar amount and the importance of it, at least give them a roadmap to how they want to proceed should they decide not that, the town people aren't ready for it. But
Bruce, I agree with you that, we should have a priority list. On the other hand, I also see that what might be a priority for the town or the recreation department, in other words, a priority for the high school, I would have my own priority list for the school facilities, and Jerry would have one for the town facilities. So do we separate that, or do we come up with one master list of what is priority for everybody because it may be different. You know what I'm saying?
Gary, I just had, how do you fold, which go along with Vin, how do you fold the Board of Education into this whole process? Because as Vin was saying, the Board of Education is going to have one set of priorities. The town's going to have a whole nother set of priorities. And, this is a report to the town council, but obviously, where our conclusions led has a lot to do with the Board of Education.
It's a good question, Rich. And there are two things. One is I'm just going to see if I can finish my thought there for Bruce without coughing. But what I was going to say on the making a list of priorities, there is that, that fear of making a list and then having somebody take you up on it. But what I was going to say is once we go to the council and they say, no, we want to do this, we think that the cost is going to be too high. We want to do it as a CIP. So you come up with a 5-year plan or whatever of how you would implement this over 5 years. And that's what we'll do. At that point, I would, at least in my head, that's where it kind of makes sense to make that kind of priority. But, I guess at least in my naive, optimistic head, I'm hoping that, we can convince the town to do this as a bonding issue and that we have enough people in town that we can convince that this is the right thing to do and that's best for the community. So, but that's only one man's opinion on here, and I'm probably matter least of all of anybody on the call. So, and as I mentioned, you were on the council, how things operate, and if you think it's helpful to have that or maybe have it in our back pocket, then I'm all for spending the time and effort to do that. Rich, in answer to your question about the Board of Ed, that's something we've discussed, kind of from the get-go here. And we reached out to the Board of Ed and asked specifically for board representatives to be, involved here. And we do have a board member who is a member of this committee. We do have, the athletic director. We did have at one point in time, the high school principal who decided to back out. And we had the middle school athletic director, also decided to kind of back out a little bit. So, I think my sense of it is that they are trusting us to come up with the best plan. And when we put that forward, I don't see any kind of resistance from the Board of Ed other than, yeah, we're on board with that. That's at least my sense. And you know, have I heard anybody say that specifically? I haven't, but it's just my sense of it.
But don't you think that I'm just like playing it forward? So we're going to propose this. This is what we came up with. This is our thoughts as a task force. And we're going to provide that. Then they're going to chew on that and almost like give us more direction, if you would. Like, and I agree with Bruce. I think that they could come back and say, okay, but we want to put in, instead of what you're thinking is, we only want to put in grass fields at Clodchester. We think that's a great idea, but for cost and blah, 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 we only want to put in grass. What does that do to you? Or what is, we can't put 2 additional fields at the high school, only 1, because it just, we did a cost and it's insurmountable for some reason. But I think that we're going to be asked to, again, so take our plan and then now work with them on what they think could make it sell to the people. I mean, you know, if we come up with a number and it's $25 million or $10 million, and they say, well, maybe we can do it for 6 by doing this, this, and this, and how does that affect it? I think they're going to come back and ask us that. I don't think there's any question. I think it just seems to me like that would be the way to continue the process.
So, Bruce, I do agree as well that we should have, and I was also the one that said, I like the list, but I don't want to say this is our most important because we'll never get to the least important. And I guess I look at it at a little bit, a step back from that, maybe as like each facility, right? We've basically kind of narrowed down to improvements at the high school that we think are necessary, improvements at Sutton Park with a couple of, you know, fields that basically support the high school, and then hopefully improvements at Clodchester for youth fields, right? And from my perspective, kind of stepping back and looking at it a little bit, the thing that's lacking the most right now is high school facilities. And the lack of high school facilities causes the high school to use all the town facilities to try to just meet the bare minimums. And then that kicks everybody off those fields until the high school is done with them. So, I mean, I kind of look at it as, do we look at each individual field? I don't know if I'd want to rank every field at the high school, and maybe that's for Vin to do. But you know, from a very high level, I think high school is priority number 1 because we have terrible assets that are woefully inadequate, and we need to fix that. And if we build fields at the high school, they'll still be open to the rest of the population after hours. So we get a benefit there. And then from the rest of the town perspective, we know we still have a need for other youth fields, you know, and hopefully those can happen at Clodchester. That also has to be done in conjunction with Board of Ed. That's a Board of Ed property. There's a school sitting on that piece of property that has to come down for those fields to be built, you know, and there's going to be a very hard conversation between the town council and the Board of Ed, in my opinion. But if we come back and say, hey, we need all these fields, by the way, Board of Ed, you're the ones that are kind of causing the hardship because you haven't built these fields for the town or for the high school in the past. And now we want to build this other one, but you didn't tear our school down. And now, you know, we're going to have to raise money. That's a cost we haven't even talked about yet, is what's it take to get rid of that school just to build the fields there. So then I guess I rank it as those areas, not individual fields within it. And, you know, and it's going to have to take a lot of coordination with Board of Ed and then how we pay for it, because some of it I could see high school stuff, you know, that could be a school project. That doesn't have to be a town project. Just like we built the middle school, it's technically, you know, the permanent building committee is kind of taking care of that. School board's running a lot of that. You know, so it could be that the school board does some and that the town does some. I think the point of our committee is to make sure that somebody is watching all of it to make sure we get what we need. Like on some level, if we would have been active 2 or 3 years ago, we might have changed some of the fields that were going in currently with the current plan. So they might have better fit what we actually need now. So I guess my recommendation would be, if we want to do a ranking, maybe we rank by like place.
Yeah.
And Vin can obviously rank the fields he thinks are most valuable to him at the high school. And hopefully we can kind of agree with him if we need to break it down to that. And then it's going to be a lot of communication and coordination between Board of Ed and Town Council.
Yeah, I think what you just said, Chad, is kind of what I was thinking, because I mean, let's say the school decides to pick up, in the school budget or school improvement, whatever would be, all right, so the school, why don't you just pay to put the lights up at the middle school? And then that won't be part of the project anymore, but that will help with the project. And then, the high school track/turf main field would be priority 1 at the high school, or priority 1 for our project. Because again, like you're saying, would be able to be used by the entire community, lacrosse leagues, soccer leagues, whatever. So I see what you're saying. The other question I would have, though, would be about the funding, because I remember in the last time I went through one of these projects, it had to go through the school because of the state would reimburse 50% of the money for the project for the school, but not for the town. So am I correct? Is that still kind of the way we have to fund it?
Partially, when it's on school property, yes. And athletics, I've been trying to dig into it too, because athletics don't get reimbursed the same way as obviously a classroom does. But the fact that they're possible to get some reimbursement, I think almost means it should go through the school board, right? I mean,
Right.
if ADA, some athletics you can't really pay for or can't get reimbursement for, but like ADA improvements and equality improvements and things like that, I think you can. I don't know if it has to be tied to an actual building or not, in which case we do have, we're proposing they need to have a field house that's equitable to everyone. But that requires very good coordination with the Board of Ed, because it could be that there's another subsequent project kind of run by Board of Ed to improve all those facilities. And ideally there's a little bit of money there that can be reimbursed by the state.
I think that with capital improvement projects, whether they're the school, whether they're from the Board of Ed or not, they all flow through the town council for the budget, I believe. I mean, I think if there's grant money or something like that, that can be used, but any project that's, I want to say 50,000 or more. I don't remember the amount, but it has to go through, what is it? 5?
I believe.
Yeah, it has to be a CIP and would go through, and they're voted on by the council. I think to Rich's point with regards to putting them in an order of priority and how would you do that? I mean, I would kind of look to the committee, because there was a lot of discussion about what was most important, what field we needed. When we got right down to it, we agreed on a finite number of fields and a finite number of each different kind. And I think that as a group with a quorum, we probably could come to some kind of agreement of where the priorities lie. And but I think that the other point that Chad, you were making with regards to the school and by property, and then you were agreeing with, is valid as well. That it's almost, to me, it's almost like a trickle down. That if you fix what's at the high school, it's going to free up other fields for it to go. So you could go that route. And maybe instead of prioritizing, there's different ways to view project, to view what we're proposing. And have a different kind of layout of it, and say, like, if we focused on the high school, that would have a trickle down effect. If you focus on this, like, because I think that the needs have a certain priority as well. And so, like, maybe I'm going to say that maybe there's no girls field hockey field or official size, and is that right, Jerry?
There's no field hockey field.
Right. So maybe we don't think, right.
Yeah.
So my point is that maybe we don't think, maybe, as a group, we're like, well, maybe that's not a priority, but certainly they need representation in terms of, so there's going to be different, priorities for people, but and maybe that's where they get 3 different scores. There's a score for number of fields needed, but whatever it is. But anyway, that's all I'm thinking. So
I think one of the things that I think we need to be clear, and I'm not arguing the point that there are different levels of needs, as you said, Bruce. But the fact is, these are all needs, and I mean, to some degree or another, and I think that the folks on this task force have been pretty consistent in saying, how important all of these things are. Doesn't mean some are more important than others, but they're all important in some way. So, I don't disagree from, with the statements about the Board of Ed. But yeah, I guess part of that does make me a bit nervous, because I don't know that, experience tells me, we're, at least 20 years of experience tells me that we're not going to see a field in Parks and Rec, through a CIP in under 10 years. I mean, I just, that just isn't reality. I'll be long gone before a field gets built for CIP for community use.
I think I'm gonna speak for Portia here. I mean, if she was here, she would be, and I think they're very good points. I think she would bring up the equity issues at the high school that exist with students and their need for to go along with their educational program, and the gender issues. I think those are all issues that have to be taken into consideration with all the priorities that we do come up with. And those are issues that the Board of Education need to address and bring up to the town. And those will solve some of the problems too, and help with the funding. As you're saying, there is state reimbursement for those types of projects, but they would have to go through the Board of Ed.
Yeah, and as you say that, Rich, I was thinking, I would consider the main field the biggest or most important, with the track around it the most important facility. However, if you think gender equity wise, which some people may be thinking, the fact that we don't have a softball field and we have a baseball field might be more of an issue for somebody else and more of a priority for somebody else. Just to think about that as well.
I totally agree with the softball thing. It's when you kind of look at how many girls teams have to leave that campus to go to practice, should have been jaw dropping a long time ago. But then also I would say I would totally agree that fixing that championship field right now, it's a football field. It's only really used by the football field. Yes, the band gets to use it sometimes as well. But that's, again, from an gender equity, basically male driven. If you do, improve that to host soccer and lacrosse and potentially field hockey, you bring in 3 new female sports. Obviously, you have 3 new male sports as well, but you get at least much better participation on a gender equity there too. So, but I would agree, not being in your shoes, Vin, the first 2 fields I would think of would be a softball field and redoing that championship field. So I would agree with those 2. But I do think that, so I think that kind of also leads into maybe we want to put it on our agenda for the next one to really, as a committee, figure out A, how we want to rank them, and then B, go through that discussion, hopefully when we have a quorum and we can vote on it, so we can rank them. And then also how, we need to really figure out our presentation. Obviously, I think coming up to the council, we need to probably get on their agenda at some point, but we need to figure out what that presentation is going to be. We probably need to start working on the champions through town to make sure that everybody, when we presented it to the groups, everybody seemed thrilled with it. That's great, but we need them to kind of come out and support this and really talk about it. And we probably need to have, that packet of information that we can hand out, or get, the handout to the counselors, handout to different youth groups, so that kind of the case is made as to, hey, here's the committee has done all this research. Here's our findings. Here's the the 5-minute elevator pitch as to, you know, what our solution is or what our recommendation is, and why we think it's valid.
Do we?
I don't know who's going to do that, but we need to do that.
I was just gonna ask another question too. I mean, do folks here? I mean, does like say it's $20 million? I mean, does that freak anybody out here about going to a referendum for $20 million to do this? If you know, if that's kind of the cost, or is it, you know, does that, you know, I'm not a voter in Groton, so I apologize, but you know, would that freak anybody here out? Bruce, okay. I mean, that's an honest.
I would, if we put forth a plan like that, I'd be very skeptical that it would catch on.
And that's what you know, that's what we need. We kind of, you know, I guess, or at least for me, it helps. That helps.
So Bruce, like my concern is, and I totally agree with you. I totally think, you know, going a referendum route really freaks me out, because it could be 5 million for fields, it could be 10 million for fields, or it could be 20 million for fields. And I think the objection is going to be the same, or at least at this point, I feel the objection would be the same. I think it's just because we're asking for money for fields, and not necessarily the number. And I'm curious to know how you guys feel about that, if it's a number thing or just the request thing.
Dollar amount?
The number doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
I just feel that we're in such a desperate need. It just, because what we've been doing is band-aiding it here and there, and it's just so antiquated. And I don't know if people understand the issues. I don't. I mean, if their child hasn't been at the high school in the last 15 years and realize that we've done nothing there, I don't even know if they understand it. But I think that by presenting what our thoughts are, and maybe, as Bruce said, and you guys have talked about, it's possible that you can take some of that in two chunks. Whether it's the Board of Ed saying, yeah, we really need to put lights on that middle school field, and maybe they have a plan. Somebody has a plan that I don't know about. I'm not in that inner sanctum, but maybe there's stuff going on but if we present this as what we need, maybe you can take when you go to referendum, by that point, you've said, okay, but the Board of Ed is paying for, they're going to put a project together to fix the whole championship field. And we're going to take care of the middle school field lights. That's already been done. I'm talking, we're 2 years down the road, right? So they put the lights up and it's all done. So maybe that number becomes a smaller number, knowing that once they get our plan and what we think should happen, people have thought about ways that they can go, the council folks, the Rachels and the Portias and Bruce that's lived it, and they kind of know where they can go to get funding, because we're going to build a field house that's now gender equity, and we're going to go get money. So it's going to knock that number down. And then some of it can be paid by without actually having to do the referendum. I guess the referendum part comes down is what I'm thinking. Once we lay it out there and this is what we need, and the council understands that, then they can do their due diligence to help the whole process, I guess.
Can I just say two more things while it's fresh on my mind? Portia kept mentioning grant money. I've noticed she's mentioned that a few times, so maybe she's aware of some grants that are out there that could be help to offset the cost. One other thing that I keeps coming to mind is when I've done 2 of these bond referendums in other communities that involve fields, and just throwing it out there, and I don't know if it actually plays in the Groton community, but it's played everywhere else, where if you put a bond together, you got to be aware of the geography of the town, where you can't give everything to one side of the town and nothing to the other side of the town and expect it to pass for the town as a whole. So in other words, when I was in Cranston, they wanted to build a new gymnasium for Cranston East, but all the money's at Cranston West. So they kind of created some, or they, I wouldn't say created needs, but they funded needs on the western side of the city with the eastern side of the city together in the bond, so that to enable to make sure that the bond would actually pass. You got to have something in it geographically for certain groups if you want that vote, or if you want that to pass in a bond. And I don't know if it plays in this community as well, but it did in where I was from before.
I would agree with you, Ben. I think that one of the things that might make it a little bit lighter here is that there's only one high school and only one junior high, where all the kids from go there. So it's not like before, where you had West Side and Cutler, and if you put something at Cutler, you left West Side out of it, or vice versa. So I think your point is something to definitely consider, but I think we might have a little bit better luck because there's only one of each school. So, and you would have it be near the school. So that might alleviate that. I think from a bonding perspective, one side of it, you could argue the economic value of putting these fields in and possibly having, tournaments and that kind of thing. But you're also alienating some people with that too, because they don't want people coming to the town. They've been there a long time and they don't want people in their town. So, but I don't think that the bonding thing, it doesn't scare me. I think that when you get the school community on board, it helps to have a big group of people behind it. And sometimes they can, get out there and shine a light on things and kind of lessen the blow. But when you take that support of the whole school community, it helps to get something passed. I think, the school referendum it took 2 tries. It's obviously a tremendous amount of money, a lot more. But I think there's also negatives coming on the heels of that people are going to say, oh, we just built a new middle school and there were all these fields on the middle school, and they don't understand the optics of, they see the optics, but they don't understand the details of, what was taken away from the middle schools and what was left in the new one, and where where we need help. So there's a lot of different things that play with it, but I'm sure the council will take that all into consideration and figure out the best tact.
So just to add on here, in my head, it's I don't know. I guess I think it's just crystal clear that a referendum is the way to go. And convincing people that we need fields is a task. And if we can do it once, that seems like great. Otherwise, we go to every year, you go to a budget meeting and you say, okay, here's phase 2. And just like what you just said, well, wait a minute, didn't we just pass some fields last year and we built those ones and now you're asking for more? And then you do that, year 3 and 4, and it just becomes this, this when does it ever end kind of question for voters. And the need, gets, arguably, or people get more callous towards the need, I guess, perhaps over time. So, for me, I guess I'd rather try to fight that battle once, take the advantage of economies of scale, if you got people coming in here with big equipment, let's get them in here to do a bunch of big equipment, and let's, and plan things out in a, because nobody can probably build 6 fields at once anyway. So, these ones are going to come online, and then we're going to move on to these other ones in a, in a bonding project. So, and the other thing, I guess, like if it's 20 million for me, like 20 million sounds like a lot of money if that's my operational budget, but 20 million in a bond for me that's not a lot of money. We pay for that over years. And the town budget is 130 million bucks a year or something like that. This is 20 million over, I don't know how many years a bond is good for. So, that really, it's not like this huge impact from a financial standpoint, at least in my head, where I get to live in another town and not be a taxpayer and concerned about all that.
So seeing as we can't vote on anything tonight, right?
No.
And
Unless you want to make an executive decision, Bruce.
No, not me. Maybe we can just schedule the next meeting and put some of this stuff on the agenda again and
Yeah.
hope
Yeah,
we get
it'll
a
be on
quorum
the
to.
agenda. I think the next, we didn't have any kind of, this is the regular meeting. It's what the third Thursday of the month. So
Right.
Right.
what is third Thursday of,
The 17th.
As long as it's not Christmas.
well, and to be honest with you though, part of the problem is that, just timing. We have, we're going to be, the town is working on capital projects and stuff like that now. And if we're, trying to give the council a chance to kind of get anything in the budget for next year in terms of planning or anything like that, moving a little more quickly is kind of what we're hoping to do. We were kind of hoping to have this whole thing wrapped up by the end of the year. If we have another meeting, and we won't be on the agenda for the town council until after that next meeting. So, if we're thinking about that, next week is Thanksgiving. The week after is, I guess, a possibility, I suppose.
You think you can reach out to the people that didn't join the meeting and get them to do a meeting 2 weeks from now, so we can do it before the holidays?
I mean, I'm willing to do that. If we decide that that's the time to schedule a meeting, I will certainly set it up and send out notice. And
Tell them we didn't have a quorum. We really need it.
I would agree with you, Danny.
And we do, I think Chad was saying it earlier, we do need to write a presentation, right? I mean, right now we just have the one sheeter with what we're recommending. And so, I mean, I'm happy to put a Google Doc up there and try to start putting together, a little bit of some kind of narrative to go with the recommendation. We need that, correct?
I guess, and I guess the question is, Chad did a fabulous job in his presentation for the public there with putting together, kind of, the history. I mean, is that at this point we've had a couple of counselors on the, in the meetings here who kind of understand that history. But there again, there's more counselors than not that maybe don't know that kind of history.
And people too, you're right. And people too who are going to need to read it who weren't in. So,
I guess, Chad, I have your presentation there, and maybe that's a place to start. If there's anything to add or subtract from that in terms of what we would say to the council, how we would tailor that message.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a launch point, right? We've got it. But I think there's a lot of stuff we've talked about as a committee, like the photographs. Like we need to go down and look at, the field and the field house and the lock. Like we've talked about really making the case so that it's not just our words, saying, oh, it's in bad condition, right? So I think that's what we need to kind of look at is getting those photographs, kind of documenting, showing the evidence that it's not just our own feelings, and then figuring out what's the right way to kind of package all that stuff together so that, yes, we have it for the council, we can deliver it to, I'm sure we're going to have other public meetings and kind of really get it out there, but then, to really boil it down to something so that you can make that elevator pitch would be very helpful.
Chad, I mean, that's something I absolutely can do. I can travel to each one of these locations and certainly document the conditions and and maybe start creating a list of woe, I guess.
Well, I think that would, as we go to the council for a presentation, that would be very helpful to be able to say, here's the locker rooms. Like, this is the 1960s locker rooms. Like, this is what it's like. And here's the ADA access. Here's handicap parking. And here's the ramp, that goes down 30 feet to get to the field. So, I mean, I just think some of that kind of we need to kind of hit them in the face. And so maybe we just continue to build on that presentation, right? We just keep adding to it. And then Bruce, maybe if you want to try to kind of coalesce all that down to, the simple handout, when I'm just thinking of referendums in the past, like the school, they kind of boil it down and send out that mailer, and it might unfold 30 times into a pretty big sheet, but it's still a one pager that kind of tries to summarize $100 million worth of spending. So I think we need to start looking towards that kind of marketing campaign, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and I think getting it into like just a PowerPoint presentation. If you think about the schools and what they did, it was a 10-page, 12-page PowerPoint where you're getting you just tell a story and with a recommendation, and in the PowerPoint you can have some of those pictures and some of the things that were discussed and issues that came up. So I think with your help, Chad, and what you presented, I can certainly watch that. I think some of the notes or some of the meetings past that where some of the things were discussed are important. But any input that anybody has would be appreciated for sure.
Do you also take the tack, and I'm just asking the question of, because I know Portia Bordelon kept referring to this, of what New London has, what Waterford has, what the neighboring communities have, and instead of just showing the woe of what we have, also showing what the neighborhood communities do have around us and why. I don't know if you take that tactic or not, but I'm just throwing it out there. So.
Then I put that on my list. That as I go around and get photos, I will absolutely get pictures of Ledger's new field,
Yeah, Ledger's beautiful.
Stonington's field, New London fields, Waterford's field, East Lyme field. I'll get pictures of all those. Yeah, I mean that's the world we're in right here.
I love the New London one because they have that second field there. The second turf field.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll shoot for the 3rd. We'll try to do 2 before Christmas, the 3rd and the 17th. The 17th would be our standard meeting, and then try to get everyone together on the 3rd.
Okay.
Because I think you're right. I think we're pushing the time.
You want to do it this year? Got to try to get it in.
Yep.
Boy, it's a shame we can't take advantage of the shutdown and get some of this stuff done now. It just it's killing me, Like,
It's a great way to do it.
That's going to be the hard part, is we'll finally get out of COVID. We'll get a year into kind of trying to get normal, and then we'll hopefully rip everything out and then have to live through growing pains of where do we put people for a year.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Be well.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Yes, happy
Thanks.
Thanksgiving.